So we were doing characters really quickly last week, and I didn't really talk about. We were talking about these different bone configurations, and I thought it'd be good just to go over what is a rig of a character before we go too far. We have a lot of people that we were messing around with all these different skeletons. We didn't say why we were using different ones. So if I go grab an avatar from my downloads folder. Let's see. This is Cinema 4D, and see if I have a character real quick. Is that a character? Let's see what this opens up. I don't have one with a mesh. Let's just make one real quick. Let's see. Do 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 do. I will go to my imports and grab our. This is a character from Ariel today. We're messing around with. I just want to talk about weight maps. So what you have here is a bone system underneath a mesh, and what happens is that every one of these vertices are being pushed and pulled by a bone, and there's a vertice can be pushed up to 100% by any bone. And so if I was looking at a point on, let's go wireframe and say, so if I was to look at like this point right here, it could be influenced by maybe 75% by this bone, 10% by this bone, and 15% by this bone, up to 100%. And that's how you're figuring out how you're deforming things. And that default mesh, the default skeleton had like two bones that were sticking out going towards the chest, and they're there to push out and keep the chest from caving in when you bend over. And so all these things are designed to give certain fidelities of how the mesh is deformed by bones. It's not about replicating the human skeleton as much as replicating the way the human skin deforms to a skeleton. And those weight maps are painted on, and before things like Mixamo and rigging, automatic rigging tools, they were done manually. So you can, let's see if I can visualize that. That's UVs. There you go. So you can see kind of color coded how much. So there's the different zones of the body, and it lets me paint it on. There's the tool. Let's see. Show me. Of course, everything changes between engine versions and stuff. But essentially, you should be able to see how much influence every. Let's go back to this mode. Every bone has on different parts of the mesh. Let's see as a whole. Let's go to the base body. Weight tool, brush, clamp. Anyway, so essentially, a lot of the if you could rig in Mixamo, we were having issues with some of the assets coming in, and correctly, and we're trying to rig in Mixamo. You can actually fix weight mapping and see how a bone is affecting things, and delete vertices you don't want it to affect, and paint on vertices that you do want it to affect. So you're not kind of stuck with how things are mapped. Just wanted to let you know there's a little bit further underneath how things are working. If you do get into problems with rigging and like the rig wasn't working and make human, always feel free to export as an OBJ or an FBX without a skeleton, and then you can upload it into Mixamo and do Mixamo's auto rigger. And we didn't talk about it. We went straight into animations, and we were having problems with some of the skeletons. So just to let you know that it's there. It's a very simple tool. It takes a few seconds to do. So I'm not even going to worry about it. I'm just going to take this character that has no bones and I'm just going to export it as it could be FBX, which is could hold bones, but we don't have it, or an OBJ, which is paired with an MTL file, which is the material file, and you zip those together. So let's just call it test. Throw it on my desktop or downloads or whatever, and that's fine. Going to my desktop, there's those two files with some textures there too. Let's go ahead and zip it up. And just so in case no one saw it, you upload your character, drag it in. This character's name will be called Desktop, which I think is actually a pretty cool name for a character. What's up, Desktop? And if anyone's ever done any match moving in After Effects, you go through the process of you kind of point to things, and it has this zoom in window at the top right, and you kind of point to the different body parts: wrists, and then elbows, and then knees, and then one on the old groin area, so it knows how the legs meet. And then you can choose whether or not you have a different kind of finger. We're going to go for full 5 fingers both sides, and we're using symmetry. But I've used this tool to rig things completely asymmetrical. Turn that off, and you can, like, I've literally rigged a tumor for a class before. Not a real tumor, but a ZBrush tumor. This process can take a little bit of time depending on how complicated the geometry is. And then it's just rigged for you, and nothing works. We'll actually be getting into this a little bit more maybe next week because we're not going to rig and make human, but I just want to let you know that's there for anyone who just wanted to kind of find another way of rigging and didn't like any of the issues with Mixamo. I think this talking about this last week would have helped some people debug some of their issues even further. So again, this is something that was, when this came out in 2014 or 2015, we're like, oh, that's so amazing. It's so much easier to teach rigging than having to do the manual process that used to be in all your game engines. So now it's there and loaded in for you to add your animations to. I think there's some issues with the elbows and the chest on their rig. So that's what I was talking about. You can clean up those weight maps. Just search for weight mapping and whatever your digital content creation tool of your choice is. So today we're going to get into more about level design and refining our stuff. So where is my text file? Great. And we're getting a little bit more into materials. You'll see in the syllabus, I've assigned another one of these learning fundamental things on materials. It's very quick, and I'm going to cover everything it's going to cover, but they go way more into the minutia of the layout of the editor. So if you feel like I'm going too quick, Louis Cataldi, the head of education at Unreal, actually does this one, and you can watch this to get some more information about materials. Obviously, it's not required, but it's there as it's a great resource for you to have. Let us go back into our project. Cool. So we've talked about blocking things out, and we've already kind of set up our baseline lake country here. Or actually, that's the one I did for mess up. Let's do my main one I did in class. Cool. So we have some cool areas, and we're going to think about our the lecture we had, which was what are some vignettes, where are some places we want people to look, and we want them to go to, where do we want to frame things, where do we want to give affordances to our director, our cinematographer, where are our vignettes, where we want to frame scenes of action, and then give meaningful action there with our avatars, and start to kind of roughly start outlining a scene. There's some important concepts to know first, and we're going to get a little bit more into materials because we really haven't made any materials yet. So I like these columns. I'm not going to change them, but I do want to just go over to the side and have fun with some materials from scratch. So if you haven't made a material, you can just right click and say material, And our style guide is that we start with M underscore, and I'll call this one base material is the key here, right? So there's an idea of inheritance and parent classes and child classes, and making top level things that you can instance off and drive parameters and have a bunch of instances of a top level that are all different, but they're all derived from the same base level. It's about optimization. It might be one of those things that changes in Unreal 5, but it's about creating it's less draw calls, it's less CPU intensive to kind of make a master material. And we're going to kind of do that and show how it actually speeds up. And then you'll see how that's being employed in actual real games and in Quixel for rapid iteration. So our material here has a few nodes in it we've already been using. We've seen how we put textures in your base color. I'm going to put in a 3-vec, otherwise known as like an RGB. You can drag that from the side, or I can hold down the 3 button and click, and then I have basically a color wheel. And I want to give it a color, and the base color can be white is fine for right now. All right. But what if I love this material? What if it's super complicated, and I love everything about it, but I just want to change the color every time I use it? Just like I want to have a bunch of different players on a soccer team, but I want half of them to be blue and half of them to be red. How do I do that without having to make a whole material from scratch, and without duplicating the entire material and doubling my draw calls in my game? So to be able to change something in real time, you need to be able to give it a name so that you can address that name. And I'm going to right click, and indeed I can give it a name. Let's see. Convert to a parameter. And now it says, what is that called? And I'm going to call it color. All right. So now I should be able to change the color in real time. For those of you who have had the woes of trying to compile very elaborate materials, it could sometimes take a long time to save. And yes, these materials are not meant to render very quickly in real time. The parameters are not meant to change in real time. A game engine wants to be lazy to start off with. It doesn't want to reserve. It wants to only reserve its runtime capabilities to things you say, I definitely want this to change at runtime. And to order to get to that, you need to create an instance of this material. So I'm going to put this over here. I'm going to right click on my base material. I'm going to save it first. And I'm going to right click, and I'm going to create an instance of the material. My style guide says that I call material instances MI, and then we can call this one color 1 for right now, because I don't know what color it's going to be. Let's lay out a sphere. Whoa, you see what that happened to my terrain? That was awesome. I have no idea what that's about. And if I hold down Alt, I can get another sphere. And let's make a few spheres. Alt again. And I got four spheres hanging out here. And for those who are wondering how to make spheres roll, I go to the details panel and say simulate physics. And if I simulate, they should roll away. All right. That's neither here nor there, but might as well, right? Just add a little bit of fun in there. And so let's not use the base material, because as I said, it's more of a palette by which to create other colors. So I'll dock that for now. And I put my first instance on this. Oh, they're all selected. Excuse me. Just select one, and I can just drag it on, or I can take it over here and put it in here. Now I'm going to open up this instance, and you're going to see it has a different interface. It's much more streamlined. It's only interested in my parameters. I'm not building anything. I'm just changing values. And my parameter here is a color. Why is it called color? Because I called it color. I enabled that parameter. And what's cool about this is that now I'm changing these things in real time. Right? We've said, hey, engine, this is important. This is changing real time. Allocate resources for letting it render in real time. Right? So if you want to start getting more into runtime changes, you need to make instances. And this will be very important as we move into sequencer. And yes, indeed, if I have a whole scene playing, I can even change it literally while it's playing. not just while it's in the viewport, so I can see it when it's running at runtime underneath all the lights and all that kind of stuff, and I can really dial it in. Right, that's super helpful. I'm gonna turn off the physics because that's just gonna become annoying after a while. On just that one. So again, as I hit play, I have the ability to change it at runtime, and say, oh, that's the way it looks in this light. That's perfect, fantastic from this framing. That's amazing. Cool. So let's do the obvious next step, which is to make another instance of that base material. Come back to the base, another instance, and this is mi color 02. And put that one on, open it up. Same material, a different color. Did I put it in the wrong one? Color. Oh, I didn't hit save. Let's see. Open it up. Great. Purple. Beautiful. I hit OK this time. And then now, let's make them the same color, Todd. Obviously, I'm favoring purple today. Somewhere else in the color palette. There you go. Great. So I now have two different things. But obviously, this is a pretty simple material. It's not that complicated. Well, what if I made it a little bit more complicated? There's a thing that called a Fresnel, which is a very flat pancake lens that when you look directly at it, you can see through it. But when you look at it from the side, it's very dense because it's a very flat thing. And like looking at this pancake, it has a lot of density. It's something that game engines can do in real time, which is kind of like one of those holy grail things. It's built in to the game engine. And I can choose between two different colors, one being that kind of like, let's say the in the middle color, and one is the edge color. So let's do I'm going to interpolate between them, which otherwise known as the old LERP, linear interpolate. One color, we'll make I could duplicate this, Control W, and make this parameter called color. Other color. To start off one, we can make this one all the way black. And then that one will go into B, and this Fresnel is your alpha. Cool. And what it's doing is giving a little bit of an edge to the dark edge of this. Maybe if I switch them, it'll become more apparent what's happening. There, you see how it's black, but with a white outline to it? So that's a really cool looking effect that now I have, because of the inheritance of the instance. If I open up the other ones, I now have two colors here too, right? So as I continue to edit this base material, I keep on adding more properties to the instances of that base material too, so that I'm not having to reinvent the wheel every single time. And now this one can have kind of a pink outer layer, right? See that glow on the outside. And then this one could, in its own way, be pink as well on the outer layer, right? Adding that shade. This is just a very subtle effect, so maybe I want it to be a little bit more blown out. Let's make these parameters as well. I'm going to right-click and say Promote. It went ahead and named it. Actually, let me undo that real quick. I'm going to click on the node and look in the details on the left, and I see that there's a default value of 5 for the exponent, which is like the fall-off, and the refraction, which is another feature we'll look in a second. So for the exponent, just so I'm starting off in the same spot, I wish it would give it the default value, but we'll go ahead and put in 5 so that it's back the way it was. So I'm adding the feature to the base material.
Sorry, what's the Fresnel again?
A Fresnel is it's a kind of lens. It's called a pancake lens, and it's very thin. So if you look at something that's very thin directly from one angle, you can see all the way through it. But if you look at it from the side, it's very dense. It might be more apparent if I do it from the opacity channel. So again, if we want to leverage this and do more, I can duplicate and make this translucent. And then I can change the translucency. And the idea is that in the center, I'm looking at it, it's completely transparent in the center. But as I see the edge where it's grouped up, where I'm seeing more polygons, it's denser, right? So if I save that now, let me change this one to opacity outer and opacity inner. And now when I go to my colors, I have them all right here. But now they're kind of not grouped the way I want it at all. They're kind of just more alphabetical. So I'll go back to my base material. I'll take these, and these are now, I'm going to group them. One's in the group of called color, and one's in the group called opacity. And this is all covered in that that tutorial that's in the learning tab, learning thing. And now if I save my base material, again, the important thing is that we update. We see that color is grouped up here and opacity is grouped down here. And as I change the exponent, we can see how the fall off changes. So that's just the idea of how to make a mask material and have everything kind of follow with that from a parent class. And really good games. And I'm not actually today because I don't want to run out of time. But a really good game will have one mask material for like all the props, and that way it's all just pulling from one parent material, and it'll be very complicated, but everything will be exposed to all those instances of that. And there's a great example, I don't know if anyone's ever played it. There's a game called What Remains of Edith Finch, and it's done by a company called, well, it's done by Annapurna Interactive, but Giant Sparrow is the leads on it. It's an IDM graduate. Her name is Chelsea Hash. She graduated 2012. They won Game of the Year for What Remains of Edith Finch, and I worked with her once on a piece, and it was great to see like how amazingly like strict she was about using one base material for an entire game. And anyway, if you go into your marketplace content and look at the free stuff, they have the entire game for free in here. If you look for What Remains of Edith Finch, it's a great game. All these different levels. It's in Oregon or whatever, and you can check out the house grounds and stuff like that. And when you break it open, I don't have time to now. You'll see that all the props use one master material. There's also something else that uses one master material, and that's called Quixel. So if you haven't seen or heard, Quixel is very famous for their mega scans, and it is a giant repository of photogrammetry assets, materials and textures, materials and objects like that. It's super amazing. It's huge, and it used to be like $1,000 a month. Well, 2 years ago, Unreal bought them, and they're completely free. So I don't know if they're free for all users, but even if you're using Unity or Cinema 4D, get an Unreal login. You can log in as your Unreal, and then you can get it for free for the other platforms. So it's great. So to access the mega scans, we're actually going to be looking at a thing called Bridge, and it's just like Adobe Bridge. It's an application that's on our desktop that helps us pull scans from the internet. So go ahead and download it for free with your Epic Games login, and then once you have it, you now have access to this entire world that entire world of assets that we can start set decorating our level and really leveling up our assets, right? And the way when you first open it up, it's going to ask you where your engine version is, so you can install the plugin. That's why it's important that I just showed where the plugins are for the game engine. I'll send you a 2-minute video for how to install the plugin. But essentially, if you installed your stuff vanilla, it's going to be in your C drive under Program Files, and you have a folder called Epic Games, and then you have your engine versions right here. Okay. I put mine on a different drive. I put mine on my D drive, but I still put it in a folder called Epic Games. And then you find Engine, and then plugins. I already have Quixel installed, and therefore it should say Megascans plugin. So I'm already installed. I'm ready to go. And then it installs it. You're ready to go. So what do you have? Well, remember when I showed you that medieval map? That entire medieval map or game was made out of assets from Quixel. It's 3D assets, categorized. It's 3D plants for your foliage tool. So many crazy things, thousands and thousands of stuff, all categorized. You have materials that you can level up your games with. And then for those who you're interested in the tiling stuff, they have like all that hiding of the repetitive tiling built into these materials as decals. These like posters you can throw on a wall, like the sign "Help." You just throw it on top of an object, and you have that. It's how you do puddles. They have what are some other things? Yeah, they just have tons of stuff, but these are the ones we'll use for today, for the sake of time. So when you first of all, I know that my world, I'm really interested in these right here. Right now I prototype them with these chrome material, but I want to have like Roman columns here. And I want to replace these and make it a little bit nicer. And how do I want to set it up? Well, I like this framing I had for my screenshots before. And I don't want my people walking around these. They're explorers and they're discovering them. And they're going to be walking around like examining these for the very first time in surprise. So I'm going to change my my viewport, and I have to figure out how to do that. 1 second. Show. Now where was that? Oops. I got rid of my modes on accident. That's no good. Allow cinematic controls different. Immersive mode. I'll come back to that in 1 second. I forgot off the top of my head. But there's a way of adding in that rule of thirds. Let me check it out real quick. Cinematic mode. Cinematic viewport. I'm not going to let this one stop me. It is... Oh, it was allow cinematic control. Oh, so I need to have my first thing, which is a camera and a sequencer. So we're talking about the timeline. Let's go ahead and start going. So I was saying how entire levels can be made from the perspective of cameras, and people who level design often drop cameras all over their scene. So let's go ahead, frame it up, and come back up here to the top left, and we say, create a camera here. I want to do a cinematic camera, which will have nice depth of field. And now, there's a camera right there. Right? I want to look at these framing right here, maybe between this stuff. And I want to drop in a cinematic camera right here. And maybe I want to see it from the perspective behind them, watching an over-shoulder shot of them seeing the immense land in front of them. And then I'm going to add in a cinematic camera here. Cool. And then when I click on them, I can see them. If I want to see all of them, there's a tiny little pin icon, and I can pin them so they're always there as I navigate around. And you can change the size of those of these tiles inside the project settings if you look at search for the word window. Great. So how do we start talking about animating these cameras or moving them around and keyframing them? Well, we're going to add in our first sequencer. And this is what we're going to spend a lot of time in for the rest of the class. go up to your cinematics, and then say level sequencer. Save it in a folder. I'm going to put mine into my assets sequencer, and I'm going to call this one discovery. Right, this is the one that this is the scene where they discover the scene. And let's throw in my first camera. All right, so now we see that I have a camera that has some properties. Right, I can animate these properties. It looks very similar to me like After Effects, and we'll go way more into sequencer later on with all the properties and stuff. One thing to notice is that it is at 30 frames per second, and the duration is 150 frames. So that's a 5-second animation right here, which is completely fine for anything we're doing in this world. If I want to move this cursor to a specific time, I can just type it in. There at 10 seconds, or we're back to 0. And I want to maybe move this camera, but I also want to see this camera. So this camera's called Cinematic Actor. If it wasn't selected, if I selected on it, it would find it in the outliner. All right. And what I want to do is I want to be this camera, and I want to do an animation. Just like I said before, we want to do a good framing at the beginning and a good framing at the end. And then if we need any keyframes in the center, we can add those later on. If we click this little camera icon, we're inside the camera, right? And now I'm in the cinematic mode where I have aspect ratio. And we can now pilot it. Go back to frame 0. And what I wanted to animate is just the position. Let's just deal with position for right now. Position is a location. So a transform is a location, rotation, and a scale. I want to keyframe all of them because I don't know how I'm going to move. Keyframed it, and you see it has a keyframe in all 3 of these. And of course, location, of course, is X, Y, and Z. And same with rotation is 3 values, and scale is 3 values. All right, so I start off with frame 0, and this is my frame at the very beginning. And what I want to do is I want to come up to the structures, but I also want to come up to my characters who are walking in and kind of see more of them as they walk in awe of my characters. Well, I'm actually controlling this camera right now. You can't really see it very well, but there's a little thing saying I'm piloting this camera. If I eject it, I'm no longer piloting it. I can also just right-click on it and say pilot it. All right, so let's go to the end of my 5 seconds. All right, 150. And then I can use my WASD keys. I can just go in a little bit, and maybe on the third right there, I'll frame this pillar, and on that third are my characters. All right, frame it up so I have interesting things on my thirds. They're kind of centered in the third, and he's equidistantly going through the frame. Come back down here and add another keyframe. That's my approach shot. If I don't like the fact that right halfway through these things aren't framed the way I want them, maybe this is too centered and I want to make it rotate a little bit, then I usually divide it in half first. Find a little bit different framing, make it just the way you want it, and then just squeeze that little transform in there, which will include both position and rotation, and that way my frame is the way I want it. Right? Just a subtle change, but it could have been something more significant. These little arrow keys help me jump to the keyframe, and maybe I want to, maybe there's like something interesting right here, and I want to kind of center there to start off with, or in the middle of the thing. And now I'm looking down and then coming back up. That's a little exaggerated, but it would, if we have an object there, it'd be a little bit more motivated. And then if I want to get rid of them, it's all deleted. It's important to note, though, that if I then was like to walk away and do whatever, I'm still piloting this camera. So do be careful of the fact that you want to eject it or disconnect it right here. And then it's there, and I can scrub, and I can watch it move. Where'd you go? So there, and holding onto it, you can see even the ticks of the keyframes as it moves forward on this spline that I just created. Cool. Let's jump into Megascans a little bit. I'm going to probably go over to 9 p.m. tonight, just so you know, just because I want to make sure I get in a little bit of bridge. So I said I wanted some pillars, and I'm there. It could be probably buildings, right? But I can also search for pillars. That's pillars. And look, we have different kind of historical ones. We have things that look like more ancient Rome, some things from different time periods, and I'm just gonna. I really like. Oh, so many good ones. Just tons and tons. Let's go for these ancient temple stone ones. All right, so here's some important settings with Bridge. You have, first of all, this is an online repository. So the first part of Bridge is to pull it down to your hard drive. When you install Bridge, it'll say where do you want to save it, where do you want your library to be. Make your library to be there on your biggest drive. For me, my storage drive is drive F, and I want to make sure that it doesn't, bloat up my C drive. So first thing I want to do is want to download it. All right. So you can just say download, but you might want to look at settings first, so you're not downloading everything. Download settings, and it's what textures are you going to be using. For default, I'm going to use all of them, just letting you know that you can say not all of them. And then models is also very important. We've talked very, very briefly of LODs, in that some things are high resolution for when you're close up, and some things are very low resolution for when you're very far away. I don't need 8 LODs. I'm not going crazy today, so I can get rid of this, and maybe just do the one that's 7,000 triangles is fine for me. All right, and go full screen real quick, and then there's a little download button here. Let's go ahead and download it. And it's on the hard drive. But there's also going to be maybe some rubble around, so I might want some broken ones. All right, so now that we're on a roll, let's say download that, and you can see how this starts clogging your hard drive real quick. Now that I have a few, I might want to have a couple more plants if I want to later on. I'm gonna get a couple decals. I want to have some maybe dust on my ground. Let's see if there's dust. All right, so we can have like these little dust things that we're gonna bring down. It's gonna have its own download settings. Go back. So here's this dust. I can, take a look at the different ways it looks. I think if I hold down, there we go. And what resolution do I want it? I don't need 8K. 2K is fine for my project. And here's another look at like the different textures inside of it, so I make sure that everything is good about it. And things that are related to it, I might want all of these. And I'm going to say download. All right, so let's go find everything I just got. Because we're Unreal, this is free, but for everyone else, they're purchased. Go to here to your purchase section, and here's things I've downloaded. All right, and now if I go here, I want to export it now to my project. So now I need to go to my export settings, and this is my engine that I had to choose this engine when I installed it, and we're at 426. You can obviously switch back and forth for your project, but what I need to do now is connect it to my project, so I'll install it to my project. So let's go to my project, which is on my C drive. There we go. And you want to find, I do believe, the content folder. Yeah, content folder. And everything seems to be okay. I can, again, review, what do I want to be JPEGs, all sorts of different kind of, well, these are export settings for everything. Models, all right. Everything's fine with me. Okay, so now these are my export settings for the entirety of Quixel. And then I'll say export. and it should go to my project. Crossing my fingers, everything's fine there. Let's do this. Let's do this. And I don't know, a cactus for good measure. Those guys are cool. Cactus is there, export. Pillars are there, export. All right. With the plugin installed in Unreal, let's see. Do you need to? You need to enable it, and once it's enabled, you're going to have a giant green Megascans button here. Just click it once, and just make sure it's working. We're not going to worry about blending layers for right now. I just want to make sure that everything's working and it's fine. And by clicking that button, I now have two different folders to look at. I have the Megascans assets that always be in their own folder at the root. And then I have this MS Megascans preset. And the whole point of that big side trip down the lane of master materials is that they're all built, all of Quixel are built off of one master material. A crazy master material that has lots of depth to it that goes further and further down the rabbit hole. But what's great is that every one of these assets has instances. So where we have a couple of things we're driving on our parameters, these Megascans. All right, so here's this stone. With that selected, I'm going to right click on this one and say replace. Or I can say place. Say place. And then I can get rid of this one. And scale it up. Let's make it 5 times 5 times 5. And now I have this asset in the same place, or similar place. And it has a material that's on there. If I double click it, I have all these opportunities to change it to make it look more like I initially wanted it. I find this to be a little bit dark. And I could take a look at the tint, make it a little brighter. I could take a look at the different textures, and we could start changing out the different assets. Okay, what is some of that stuff? Can we make it? You have to uncheck it or check it to make it work. And what happens when I tint it this way? Just making it is a very dark asset. Maybe I need to change the lighting for it now, or I can find a different asset to put in there. Maybe this pillar is actually this cactus here. And we'll uniformly scale it over here. It's just in the shadow. It's actually fine. Just make it a little bigger. And definitely need a bigger cactus in the world. Great. And so we can see how we can start replacing it with our better assets. We did the blocking out earlier with the other ones, but these look better now. And then to hide it a little bit, I'm going to find my that's not a thing I wanted. Let's go back to my bridge and let's find a decal that I want. Export that one. Download. And export. And maybe that one. Download. Export. Yes, all. It'll start importing it all. And what I'm looking for is a thing called a decal. They're going to give it to me? Okay. Let's get back my window for my modes. Place actors. Let's see if I can do a decal. Right. So decals are like little posters I was saying. And you can add the splatters or whatever. Let's go ahead and grab one of some of these atlases and throw them in to this decal material. So look, now I have that cool thing that's there. Right? So you can start adding in little materials that have to UV map them. But you can still scale them. You can still scale the size. One thing to note is that as you rotate, they are three-dimensional. So you need to align them in the correct manner. But luckily it was doing it by default. Maybe I would want to change slightly how it's rotated along the hill. Cool. And so we can have all sorts of little dust splatters. To help make the area look interesting. And then of course we could scale it down to 24 by 24 by...
What is happening on the reflection of that cube?
The reflection of right here.
Yeah.
So that's the decal overlapping with the because
okay.
remember it's three-dimensional. So what I can do is if I bring in the sides, you see that it's no longer overlapping with it, or I can bring it down further so that it doesn't go as high. Right, these green lines right here are how three-dimensional it is. And this is how it's easy just to throw it onto three-dimensional objects because it actually has depth. Cool. So we now have a scene that we're slowly replacing with Quixel assets. And the last thing we want to do is yeah, this is actually fine for right now. We'll get some other things later on. I do want to bring up the grid really quick. 1 second. If we go to my perspective cinematic viewport, now I can line up my rule of thirds, and I have my grid. Cool. So if I go back to my sequencer, discover, go over to it, come in here, and lock into my camera. I can now see my grid, right? And I can watch it animate from here, going into those discoverers. And then all we have left to do is find the sequencer in my my level, which is right here. I can always just look for sequencer. I have to spell it correctly. And then say, I want you to autoplay. And therefore, when I hit play, it's the first thing that happens. This little ball is because I don't have a player start somewhere. I had a player start and throw it under the ground. I hit play again. Everything looks great to me. So I want to export it. Oops. So I'm going to say render movie. AVI is unfortunate, but it's fine. Let's do it at 720p. I don't care if it's compressed. By default, it'll go to my saved folder, which is fine. And then what's cool about this is I'm going to do an offline render using a real-time engine, so I can actually render out like an 8K movie, and it'll take a little bit of time, but it's much quicker than doing it in like Maya or whatever. So I capture my movie, I save my things. It only shows a little bit of the screen. I don't know why it does that, but you can see it's rendering out. It's done. It gives me a little link right here at the bottom, which is my saved folder. And I made a movie. Some things of note is that obviously you see this word preview here. That's because I haven't baked my lights. We don't need to bake our lights because we're not really worried about performance when we're doing an offline render. So I can just be smart and go find all my lights and make them all movable. That point light is not movable. And that spotlight isn't movable. And now the word preview should be gone from everything. It is. Cool. So as you think about these vignettes, I found this one right here. Oops, I gotta eject my thing. And I found one here I liked. I found one over here. Just find one little camera move this week as a start, and lay in some cameras. Remember, you can just navigate around and drop a camera, and then you can just design things based off of that camera angle and make sure everything looks good for your framing. Obviously that was a little quick, but I really don't want you to go too far into sequencer. I'm more interested in you just putting a camera down for right now. Any questions about that? So import a couple assets from Quixel, add them to your scene, and just why did you put those things in your scene? Take a still shot is fine. You don't have to use sequencer at all even. I just want to show you how to enable this cinematic viewport. I got a little ahead of myself. So don't even worry about sequencer. Just throw in camera angles and get screenshots and explain why you're framing things the way you're framing it for your shot. Just kind of like why I said these guys' motivation is they just discovered this, they came over the hill, and they're in awe of a giant cactus plant from the past. Cool?
Is the AVI the only format you can?
Oh, no. That's the worst one for sure. If you're interested in doing the render properties, I would definitely do at least a PNG sequence. If you want really high definition, do an EXR sequence. If you have Adobe Media Encoder, just open up Media Encoder and you can load the entire image sequence by choosing the first frame of the sequence within the render folder. That's a little out of scope of what we're doing today, but a media encoder, you just say File, Add Source, choose the first frame, it'll bring in the whole sequence, and then you can choose various render settings as if you were using Premiere or After Effects, and then render it out.
All right, thank you.
Yep. Again, go in, rearrange your scene a little bit, think about why, and then drop a few cameras in there to frame it out and talk about what is interesting about this vignette inside your world. Cool. Right, we're getting into it now. We're like getting into the storytelling. So it's exciting. Don't feel limited by whatever brainstorm we did a few weeks ago. Feel free to augment and deviate and break how you want to. It's your work. Do whatever you want to do. All right. Cool. Well, good times. I will stop the recording.